The forest was quiet but not peaceful. Moonlight filtered through the thick branches, casting pale silver shadows on the forest floor. The wind whispered like a ghost, carrying the scent of pine and something darker, something ancient. Ilara moved carefully, her boots crunching softly on the fallen leaves. She had been traveling for hours, following the faint trail that led to the edge of the cursed lands. Everyone in the nearby villages warned her to stay away from the mountains where the Lycan King ruled, but she had no choice. Her village depended on her. Her heart beat fast, not only from the journey, but from the fear that clung to the stories she had grown up hearing. The Lycan King was no ordinary ruler. He was said to be half human, half beast, a creature of the night, feared and revered in equal measure. Those who looked upon him without permission vanished, or worse. Yet here she was, standing at the edge of his dark fortress, a castle that rose from the cliffs like a jagged crown. Its towers pierced the night sky, and from its highest spire, a single red light glowed a warning, or perhaps a challenge. Ilara drew in a deep breath, steadying her nerves. She could not turn back. Her people were suffering from a drought that had lasted seasons, and the only hope rested with the Lycan King. Legends said he possessed power over life and death, and that he could call the rains if he willed it. But no mortal had ever entered his castle freely. The massive gates loomed before her. Carved from blackened iron, they were etched with strange symbols that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. She stepped forward, her hand brushing against the cold metal. And then a deep voice, smooth and commanding, filled the courtyard. "Who dares to enter my domain?" Ilara froze. The voice was not human, yet it was not beastly either. It held authority and an almost painful loneliness. From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall and broad, cloaked in black fur that seemed to ripple with its own life. His eyes, golden and intense, fixed on her. She felt as though he could see straight into her soul, and the courage she had summoned moments ago wavered under his gaze. "I am Ilara." "Oh," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I come to ask for your help." The Lycan King tilted his head, studying her. His sharp features softened only slightly, and for a moment he seemed more human than monster. "Help?" he repeated, almost amused. "Mortals rarely come seeking help here. They usually come to beg or to die." "I do not beg," Ilara said, lifting her chin. "I offer a bargain. My people are suffering, and I am willing to do what is needed if you grant me your aid." The king's gaze narrowed. He circled her slowly, silent as a shadow, his claws clicking faintly against the stone floor. Ilara did not flinch. She had trained herself to remain calm, even in the face of danger. "You are brave," he said finally. "Or foolish. Perhaps both." He stopped in front of her. "I could grant your wish, mortal. But why should I? What would you offer me in return?" Ilara swallowed. She had expected this question, but the answer had to be careful. Any misstep could end her life. "I will. I will serve you, if it is what you require. Or I can act as your companion if you wish. I only ask that you hear my request." The king's eyes glimmered in the moonlight, and for a moment the forest seemed to hold its breath. "Companion?" he said slowly, the word tasting strange on his tongue. Then, in a whisper so low that only she could hear, he added, "Pretend you're my wife." Ilara's blood ran cold. She had expected anything: bargains, tasks, even danger, but this was beyond what she could have imagined. She stumbled slightly back, staring at him in disbelief. "What?" she began, but he cut her off. "You will live in my castle. You will share my table, walk my halls, and be seen by my people as my wife. Only then will I grant your request." His golden eyes were intense, almost pleading, though he would never admit it aloud. "It is not a game, mortal. Refuse, and the path you came will disappear forever." Ilara steadied herself, fighting the rapid beating of her heart. She could not deny the fear that threatened to consume her, but she also sensed the desperation behind his words. Even a creature as powerful as him carried loneliness deeper than she could imagine. She hesitated, then forced herself to speak clearly. "If I agree, there must be one condition." The Lycan King's expression darkened, a shadow passing over his face. Condition? Yes, she said, holding his gaze. I will enter your castle and act as your wife, but I must be allowed freedom of mind and movement. I will not be a prisoner, and you must trust me, even when it goes against your instincts. Only then will I stay. The king's eyes narrowed, and he studied her with a predator's patience. You dare command me? His voice was low, a growl under the calm surface. No mortal has ever dared to make demands here. Few even speak when I order them to kneel. I am no ordinary mortal, she said firmly, stepping closer. And I will not pretend to be afraid when fear will do no good. If you wish my help, you must honor this. Otherwise, I will leave tonight, and your secrets remain yours, but my people will suffer. For a long moment, silence fell between them. The wind stirred the branches above, carrying their tense breath like a shared rhythm. Then, slowly, the king nodded. Very well, he said, his golden eyes holding a glimmer of something raw and human. You will have your freedom. But understand this, mortal. The walls of this castle are as much a prison as they are protection. One misstep, one betrayal, and even I will not save you. Alara nodded, understanding the weight of his words. She was entering a world ruled by darkness, by rules she did not yet know, and by a man who was both king and monster. Yet she had made her choice. As she followed him through the gates, the castle seemed alive, watching her. Shadows moved along the walls, and strange symbols glowed faintly in the corners of the halls. Every step she took echoed with a mixture of fear and awe. The king led her to a chamber high above the ground, overlooking the forest. Candles flickered in the corners, casting long shadows across tapestries depicting battles and beasts long thought extinct. This will be your room, he said. You will dine with me. You will walk the halls as if you belong. But remember, this is only pretense, Alara. You are not my wife. Not yet. Alara met his gaze, sensing the tension beneath his words. And yet she said softly, if I play my part well, perhaps I could become more than pretense. The king's lips twitched, almost a smile, but it vanished quickly. Do not speak of such things. Not yet. That night, as Alara lay awake in the strange grandeur of the castle, she could hear the soft growl of the king in the distance, like a lullaby twisted with sorrow. She wondered what lay behind those golden eyes, what loneliness and pain they had witnessed. And though fear lingered, she felt a strange pull, a thread of something fragile, yet powerful. Tying her fate to this king of beasts outside, the moon rose high, illuminating the cliffs and the dark forests below. Somewhere in the night, a wolf howled, and the sound echoed like a warning or, perhaps, an invitation. Alara's mind was full of questions, and yet she knew one thing with certainty: tomorrow. Her journey would truly begin, and she would need every ounce of courage to survive the Lycan King's world and perhaps to survive him. For the first time, she understood that this was not just a matter of bargaining for reign or survival. This was a test of heart, of trust, and of a strange, forbidden connection that neither of them fully understood. Yet, and somewhere deep within the shadows of the castle, the Lycan King wondered if he had underestimated her, or if, for the first time in centuries, he had finally found someone who could see the man behind the beast. The night stretched on, heavy with secrets, and the castle watched silently as the fates of mortal and king intertwined, setting the stage for a bond that would challenge curses, darkness, and even destiny itself, to be continued. The morning light spilled across the castle halls, casting long shadows that danced on the stone walls. Alara awoke to the soft, steady rhythm of the wind brushing against the windows. Her room was quiet, yet she felt watched. Not in a threatening way, but in the way one senses another presence that is alive, thinking and waiting. She rose, dressed in the simple garments the king had provided, and walked to the tall window overlooking the courtyard. From this height, the forest stretched endlessly, dark green and silver under the morning sun. Birds flew cautiously through the mist, their songs hesitant, as if they too feared the presence of the castle's master. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called. Steadying her voice, the door opened slowly, and the Lycan King stepped in. He moved with a silent grace that reminded her of shadows slipping across walls. His golden eyes, piercing yet unreadable, followed her every motion. "You are awake early," he said, his voice carrying a mix of curiosity and command. "Did you sleep well?" Ilara turned to face him. "I slept," she replied simply. "The bed is comfortable." A flicker of something softened in his gaze, but it disappeared almost as quickly as it came. "Comfort is not a gift I offer lightly," he said. "It comes at a price, one many do not see until it is too late." Ilara felt a shiver run down her spine, but she held his gaze. "I am here to pay that price," she said calmly. He raised an eyebrow. "Bold words for someone so small in this castle," he murmured, though there was no mockery in his tone. "Very well, come with me. Breakfast will be served, and the council of the castle will meet. They must see you as my wife." Ilara followed him through halls lined with armor, weapons, and tapestries depicting centuries of war. Each step echoed with a weight of history and power. Servants hurried past, eyes lowered in respect or fear, murmuring greetings that vanished as quickly as they were spoken. When they reached the dining hall, the room was vast, high ceilings adorned with carvings of wolves, and long tables stretched beneath glowing chandeliers. At the head sat the king's advisors, men and women whose eyes flickered with curiosity and suspicion as they observed her. Ilara took a deep breath. She could feel the tension in the room, the weight of judgment and expectation. Yet she held herself with dignity. To survive here, she needed not only courage, but presence. The king gestured for her to sit beside him. "Do not be afraid," he said softly, though the words were more an acknowledgement than reassurance. "You will follow the customs, yes, but you are not here to be silent. Speak when you must, but wisely." Ilara nodded. "I understand," she said. The meal was a quiet affair. The king ate with a careful precision, his movements deliberate and controlled. While Ilara focused on understanding the people around her, they were loyal to the king. Yes, but there was tension, a silent challenge, as though they waited to see if she would falter under the weight of her role. "You are brave," the king said quietly during a pause. "Few could sit here and not tremble." "I have no choice," Ilara replied. "My people need this, and I will not falter for them more for myself." The king's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than expected. He said nothing, but she could feel his mind turning, measuring her, testing her, questioning her. After breakfast, he led her through the castle gardens, a vast maze of hedges, fountains, and statues of wolves frozen in mid-leap. The air was fresh, yet tinged with something wild, something untamed. A reminder of the king's true nature. "Do you know why I chose you?" he asked suddenly, his voice low and almost vulnerable. Ilara shook her head. "I only know that I have come seeking help." "You are not like others," he said. "Most mortals I encounter cower. They do not challenge me. They do not see me beyond the beast. But you have fire and fearlessness. That is rare." Ilara studied him carefully. There was truth in his words, yes, but also a shadow she could not yet name. "Perhaps," she said softly, "but fire without control can be dangerous." The king's lips twitched, almost a smile, though he quickly masked it. "Indeed, that is why you will have your freedom here. But no, this freedom is a test. It is not merely granted. It must be earned." Ilara nodded, understanding the weight behind his words. Every step she took in this castle was a balance between trust and caution, power and submission. The next few days were a lesson in patience, observation, and adaptation. She learned the rhythms of the castle, the hidden passages, the ways the servants moved silently, the subtle signs of the king's moods. She began to see the man behind the beast, the king beneath the Lycan curse. He was commanding, yes, and dangerous, but he was also lonely, burdened with a history of betrayal and solitude. One evening, As the sun dipped below the mountains and painted the sky with streaks of red and gold, Elara found herself alone in the gardens. The king emerged from the shadows, silent as always, and approached her. "You do not fear me," he said, standing close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "I have learned," she replied. "Fear can guide us, but it should not rule us. I refuse to be ruled by fear, not in your halls, not anywhere." He regarded her silently, and then, unexpectedly, he touched her hand. The contact was brief, a fleeting brush, yet it sent a shiver through her. "Few mortals have ever dared speak to me this way," he murmured. "Fewer still have stayed their ground. You are, unlike anyone I have known." Elara met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "Perhaps," she said softly, "or perhaps I am simply stubborn." The king's golden eyes softened in a way that made her heart race. "Stubbornness," he said, "can be a strength, or a curse. Sometimes it is both." They stood in silence for a long moment, the wind rustling the leaves, carrying the scent of flowers and earth. There was an unspoken understanding forming between them, fragile yet undeniable. But the calm did not last. From the shadows, the faint sound of movement reached their ears. Servants hurried past in whispers, their faces pale, and the king's ears twitched, senses alert. "Trouble," he said simply, his body tensing, muscles coiling like a spring. "The castle always listens. It hears those who wish harm." Elara's heart pounded. "What is it?" "Nothing you need fear." Yet he said, "But you must learn here. Nothing is ever simple. Every shadow can hide a threat. Every ally may carry secrets. You are not only my guest, Elara. You are part of this world now. And this world is dangerous." Elara nodded, a mixture of fear and determination swelling inside her. She had come seeking help, and now she understood the depth of what she had entered. The king's world was dark, unpredictable, and alive with danger. Yet it was also a place where courage, loyalty, and perhaps something more could flourish. As the sun disappeared entirely, leaving the sky a deep indigo, the king led her back to the castle. The corridors seemed longer in the dark, and every shadow carried the possibility of danger. Yet she walked beside him without faltering, trusting herself and, strangely, him. That night, as she lay awake in her chamber, she reflected on the day's events. She had met the king, spoken with him, walked the halls, and glimpsed the man beneath the beast. She realized that the bargain she had made was more than a contract. It was the beginning of a delicate dance of trust, power, and something she could not yet name. And somewhere in the shadows of the castle, the Lycan king watched her. His thoughts were unreadable, his intentions hidden. Yet even he could not deny the pull he felt toward this mortal who challenged him. Who dared to stand beside him, and yet remain unbroken? The night passed with the soft whisper of the wind and the distant howl of wolves. A reminder that the world outside the castle walls was alive, dangerous, and unpredictable. Inside, however, the seed of something new had been planted, something neither mortal nor king could fully control. To be continued. The castle had grown quiet after the day's bustle, yet the air was thick with unease. Elara moved carefully through the long corridors, her footsteps soft against the cold stone floor. Though she had begun to understand the rhythms of the castle, she sensed something had shifted. Even the shadows seemed restless, as if they carried whispers of secrets long buried. She reached the library, a vast room lined with shelves that stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with books bound in leather and strange symbols. The scent of old parchment filled the air, mingling with the faint musk of the castle itself. She had come here to seek knowledge, not just of the king's world, but of the curse that haunted him. She needed to understand what she had entered, not only for her people, but for herself. A low growl startled her from her thoughts. The king emerged from the shadows, his golden eyes fixed on her. "You wander where most fear to tread," he said, voice calm but edged with warning. "These halls are filled with truths that can wound as easily as swords." "I need to know," Elara said, her voice steady. "If I am to help, I must understand." Your curse, your past, everything. I cannot act blindly." The king studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. If you wish to see the truth, you must be prepared to face it. Not all stories end kindly. Not all hearts survive what they discover." He led her to a large table covered in ancient scrolls. With careful, deliberate motions, he unrolled one, revealing a map of the kingdom. Lines marked territories, some burned or crossed out, evidence of wars fought and won, perhaps lost. "Here," he said, pointing to a section of the map, "is where my enemies first rose against me, where betrayal began and where the curse was born." Elara leaned closer, studying the markings. "Tell me everything," she urged. The king's gaze drifted to the window, where the moonlight pooled on the stone floor. "Long ago, I was like any other prince," he began, his voice low, almost reluctant. "I ruled with justice and strength, but the world is cruel to those who show kindness. My closest allies turned against me. My people suffered. And in my anger, in my grief, I made a choice that changed everything. A choice that bound me to this form." He flexed his hands, and for a fleeting moment, the sharpness of his claws seemed more a symbol of his pain than his power. "The curse is not simply a matter of flesh and blood," he continued. "It is a weight on my soul, a reminder of what I lost, and what I cannot reclaim." Elara felt a pang of sympathy. She had heard many tales of kings and their cruelty. But here was a man shaped by loss and isolation, a creature who carried the burden of centuries. "You are not alone," she said softly. "I may be mortal, but I can help. You do not have to bear this entirely on your own." He turned to her, his eyes reflecting something raw and human beneath the golden glow. "You speak as though you understand," he said. "Yet no mortal can understand what it is to carry this weight. You will see only shadows, never the full darkness." "Then let me see the shadows," she replied. "Even a shadow can be illuminated if you look closely enough." For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy and full of unspoken truths. Then the king nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Very well. But be warned, curiosity can be dangerous. The more you know, the more you will question. Everything, even your own heart." Elara nodded. She had no fear of questioning herself. She had come too far to falter now. The days that followed were filled with lessons, both subtle and harsh. The king introduced her to the secrets of his world, the ways of the Lycans.
Yes.
The hidden passageways in the castle, the creatures that roamed the forests under his command. She observed, learned, and adapted. And with each lesson, she saw more of the man beneath the beast. He was patient at times, fierce at others. His golden eyes softened when she asked questions about his past, yet flamed with intensity when danger approached. She realized that trust would not come easily even between them. It was something earned, day by day, through courage and understanding. One evening, as the sky bled red and gold with the setting sun, a commotion in the courtyard drew their attention. Guards ran shouting orders, their faces pale and anxious. Elara followed the king to the balcony overlooking the castle grounds. "They have come," he said quietly. "Rival clans. They have sensed weakness, and they will strike." Elara's heart pounded. She had known danger existed, but seeing it approach so directly filled her with both fear and determination. "What can I do?" she asked. "Watch, learn, survive," the king replied. "And remember, courage is not the absence of fear. It is the will to act despite it." The battle that followed was swift and brutal. The rival clans attacked with precision, but the castle's defenses held. The king moved like a shadow among them, powerful and commanding, striking with strength that seemed beyond human. Yet even in the midst of the battle, he was careful, strategic, protecting those around him. Elara observed him closely, noting not just his ferocity, but the restraint, the thoughtfulness, and the intelligence behind every action. He was more than a monster. He was a ruler, a protector, a man who bore the weight of his curse with an almost unbearable dignity. After the battle, as the last of the attackers fled into the forest, the king returned to the castle, his armor streaked with mud and blood. He did not speak of victory or defeat. Instead, he led Alara to the gardens, now quiet and bathed in the soft silver light of the moon. "You faced fear today," he said, his voice low, almost a growl, "and you did not falter." Alara met his gaze. "I had to. Not just for me, but for your people, for those who cannot protect themselves." For the first time, the king seemed to study her differently, not as a guest or an ally, but as someone who had proven herself in ways few could. "You are bold, Alara," he said. "Perhaps too bold, but boldness has its place here. And perhaps it is needed." The wind stirred the leaves around them, carrying the scent of earth in distant storms. The castle seemed alive, as though it acknowledged her courage, her presence. And in that moment, a connection, fragile and unspoken, formed between them. A bond that was not yet love, not yet trust, but something in between, a shared understanding of risk, responsibility, and the power of choice. Alara looked up at him, seeing both the man and the beast in the same gaze. "You do not have to bear this alone," she said softly. "Even a king, even a curse, can be tempered with help, with understanding." The king's expression softened, just slightly, though the shadow of centuries lingered in his eyes. "Perhaps," he murmured, "but do not mistake my silence for acceptance, nor my presence for trust. Both must be earned. As you are learning." Alara nodded. She understood. This was a delicate dance, one that required courage, patience, and awareness of every word, every movement, every glance. Yet she did not falter. She would face the darkness, the curse, and the king himself, if it meant finding a way to help her people, and perhaps a way to touch the heart of the man behind the beast. As the night deepened, she walked back to her room, the moonlight guiding her steps. The castle felt less like a prison now, and more like a world in which she had a purpose. Danger would come, challenges would rise, but she was ready to meet them. And somewhere in the shadowed corridors, the Lycan King watched her retreating form, his mind restless. He had known power, fear, and loyalty in countless forms, yet this mortal, small, fragile, yet unyielding, had stirred something unexpected in him. Something he had not felt in centuries. He did not name it. He did not speak it aloud. But even he could feel the shift, a change in the rhythm of the castle, a thread of something fragile, yet unbreakable. Tying his fate to hers, the night stretched on, quiet but alive, carrying the promise of challenges to come, the weight of unspoken truths, and the possibility of a bond that could endure curses, darkness, and even time itself. To be continued. The night was restless, and the castle seemed alive with whispers. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of candlelight carried a tension that made Alara's heart race. She had grown accustomed to the rhythm of the halls, to the quiet strength of the Lycan King as he patrolled the fortress. Yet tonight felt different. The air was heavier, and even the shadows seemed more watchful, as though warning her that danger was near. She stepped lightly along the corridors, carrying a tray of herbs and remedies she had learned to prepare. Those small tasks, they allowed her to feel useful, to hold a purpose in a world dominated by the king's power. She knew that knowledge, even the simple act of understanding his world, could be a form of strength. "You should not wander so late," a voice said from the shadows. It was the king, moving silently, his presence as commanding as the moonlight that spilled across the stone floor. "I am not afraid," Alara replied, placing the tray down carefully. "I am learning. Every corner, every shadow. I need to know it all." He stepped closer, his golden eyes reflecting both curiosity and caution. "You risk much. Courage is admirable, but some risks can cost more than you imagine." Alara met his gaze steadily. "I understand the risk, and I accept it, if I am to help you. Truly help, I cannot remain idle." The king studied her for a long moment, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Very well, but understand this. The curse is not idle either. It grows stronger when ignored, feeding on anger, sorrow, and fear. Tonight, you may see it closer than ever." A shiver ran down Alara's spine. She had glimpsed the king's transformation before, the way his strength and presence shifted when the curse threatened to consume him. Yet she had never seen it fully, never faced it so directly. Suddenly a low growl echoed through the halls. The king's posture changed instantly. Alert, predatory, ready. Shadows seemed to twist around him, drawn to the movement of his muscles, the tension in his form. Ilara's pulse quickened, but she did not step back. "They are here," the king murmured, almost to himself. The curse stirs. It senses weakness. Before she could respond, the room seemed to darken. The candles flickered and guttered, casting long, shifting shadows. The king's eyes glowed brighter, golden light spilling across the floor, and a shiver of energy ran through the castle walls. Ilara stepped closer, sensing both fear and a strange wonder.
"Oh, what is happening?"
she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "The curse," he said simply. "It tests me. And now you will see why trust is so fragile here." Suddenly his form shifted. Where a moment ago he had stood as a man, tall and commanding, he now towered, his features more wolf than human. Fur bristled along his arms and shoulders, claws glinting in the candlelight, eyes shining like molten gold. A growl rumbled deep in his chest. Ilara did not move. Instead, she stepped forward, holding her hands steady. "I am not leaving," she said softly. "I am here. I will not abandon you." The king's gaze flicked to her, a mixture of surprise, pain, and something unspoken. The transformation was violent, yet controlled. He had trained himself to endure it, to restrain the beast within. But the presence of another, someone who could face him without fear, seemed to anchor him, even slightly. You stay," he said, his voice a low rumble beneath the growl. "Few dare." "I am not afraid," Ilara repeated. "I am here because I choose to be. Not out of fear, but because I see you, both parts of you, and I will not abandon either." For a long moment the castle was silent, except for the sound of his heavy breathing, the growl fading into something quieter. Slowly, his form began to return to human, fur receding, muscles relaxing. His features softening as the curse ebbed, drawn back into control by sheer will and perhaps by her courage. Ilara stepped closer. "You see," she said softly, "even the strongest can be helped, if they allow it. Even a curse can be tempered with trust." The king's golden eyes studied her, lingering on her face. "Trust," he murmured, the word foreign on his tongue. "I have not known it in centuries. And yet you offer it freely." Ilara nodded. "Trust is not weakness, it is strength. And strength is not only in power, but in willingness to stand with another." He fell silent, pacing slowly, as if turning her words over in his mind. The castle, too, seemed to shift around them, shadows relaxing, tension easing. Yet there remained a sense of vigilance, a reminder that the world beyond these walls was as dangerous as the curse within them. "You are remarkable," he said finally, voice low, almost reverent. "Few mortals would dare confront me, let alone remain. And yet you do more than endure. You see me." Ilara felt a warmth rise within her chest. "I see more than a curse, more than a king, more than a beast. I see a man who carries his world on his shoulders, yet fights to protect it. That deserves respect." The king's expression softened, a rare vulnerability showing in the curve of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders easing. "Perhaps I have underestimated the courage of mortals," he admitted, "and perhaps I have underestimated you." A distant howl echoed through the castle grounds, a reminder of the dangers that lurked beyond the walls. The king stiffened once more, his predatory instincts returning, though tempered now by reason. "Rest tonight," he said, his voice commanding yet gentle. "Tomorrow brings new lessons, and you must be ready. The world beyond these walls is not idle. Enemies watch, allies wait, and the curse will never pause." Ilara nodded, though a part of her wished to stay, to learn more in this quiet hour of connection. "I am ready," she said softly, "not because I am fearless,
Out!
but because I choose to stand here with you." For a long moment the king said nothing. Then, almost imperceptibly, he placed a hand on her shoulder. The touch was brief, grounding, and yet carried an unspoken acknowledgement of the bond forming between them. You were brave, he said finally, and stubborn. Perhaps. It's dangerously so, but it may be what is needed. The night stretched on, heavy with the weight of what had transpired. Ilara returned to her chambers, her mind alive with thought. She understood now that the curse was not merely a matter of the king's form, it was his history. His grief and his loneliness made flesh. And she had glimpsed, however briefly, that even a heart encased in shadow could respond to courage, compassion, and understanding. Outside, the moon hung full and bright, illuminating the castle and the forest beyond. The wind carried the scent of pine and earth, mingled with the faint remnants of the battle earlier in the week. And somewhere in the darkness, creatures stirred, sensing the shift within the castle. The king's enemies would come again, drawn by opportunity and weakness. But tonight he was steadied, anchored by the presence of a mortal who dared to see him fully. Ilara lay awake for hours, contemplating the day's events she had faced, a transformation few could endure, seen a beast within a man, and stood firm when instinct screamed for flight. The bond forming between her and the king was delicate, tenuous, and yet undeniable. It was built on trust, courage, and the shared recognition of vulnerability, a fragile connection that might endure the darkness or shatter under its weight. And somewhere, deep within the castle, the Lycan king contemplated her bravery. He had known power, loyalty, and fear in countless forms, yet this mortal, small, and human, had shown him something that eluded him for centuries: hope, not hope. That his enemies would fail, nor that his curse would lift. But hope that even a heart encased in shadow could reach for something more. The night was long, and the castle quieted under the moon's watchful gaze. Shadows lengthened and softened, carrying the promise of new challenges, new tests, and new revelations. The bond between mortal and king had strengthened, yet both knew the path ahead was fraught with danger, mistrust, and temptation of the darkest kind. But for the first time in many years, the king did not walk the halls alone. And for the first time, Ilara felt the truth of her bargain, that she was no longer just a visitor, nor merely a pretender. She was part of something greater, a connection, forged in courage, respect, and the quiet. Growing recognition that the line between beast and man, mortal and king, could be crossed if one dared enough. To be continued. The castle was unusually silent that morning, as if it held its breath in anticipation. Ilara walked through the halls with purpose, feeling the weight of the coming day press against her shoulders. She had learned much since her arrival: the ways of the king, the subtle rhythms of the castle, and the nature of the curse that shadowed him. But nothing could fully prepare her for what awaited. The Lycan king stood in the central hall, tall and commanding, his golden eyes fixed on her. He did not speak immediately, but the intensity of his gaze carried a message more powerful than words. The air between them was thick with unspoken understanding, a bond formed in courage, trust, and shared trials. "The forest stirs," he said at last, his voice calm yet edged with warning. "The clans will come. They know you are here. They know the king's attention is divided. Today, you will see why the world fears this castle." Ilara swallowed, but she did not retreat. "I am ready," she said softly, but firmly. "I will stand beside you, whatever comes." He studied her, as if measuring the depth of her resolve. Then, in a voice that was both sharp and rare in its gentleness, he said, "Very well. Then we face this together." The first attack came at midday. The castle gates shuddered under the impact of battering rams, the war cries of rival clans ringing out across the stone courtyards. Ilara and the king moved swiftly through the halls, coordinating guards, positioning archers, and sealing passages to prevent infiltration. The tension was almost unbearable, yet every command, every decision, was precise, controlled, and effective. Ilara felt a surge of pride and fear in equal measure. She was no longer just a visitor. She was a participant, a strategist, a partner in the fight. Every step she took, every choice she made, was a testament to her courage and determination. The king fought beside her when necessary, his strength and speed unmatched, yet he moved with a restraint that revealed his mind as much as his power. He was not merely a beast, nor merely a king. He was a protector, a leader, and a force of nature tempered by awareness and wisdom. At one point, a group of attackers breached a side gate. Ilara acted instinctively, directing guards to intercept them while moving to secure the castle's inner sanctum. Her heart pounded, but she did not falter. Her presence, calm yet decisive, inspired those around her. The king's gaze met hers across the chaos. In that brief moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them. They were stronger together than apart. She had seen the beast in him, faced it, and yet she had remained steadfast. And now, in the heat of battle, her courage anchored him, reminding him of the man he still was beneath the curse. Hours passed in a blur of strategy, movement, and vigilance. The attackers were relentless, but the castle held firm. And as the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows over the courtyard, the last of the intruders fled. Leaving behind a trail of defeat and broken ambition, Ilara stood in the central hall. Breathing heavily, her hands trembling from exertion, the king approached, his expression unreadable, yet softer than she had ever seen. "You have done well," he said quietly. "You have faced fear, and you have acted with courage. Few mortals could endure this, and fewer still could stand as you have." Ilara met his gaze, feeling both exhaustion and an unfamiliar sense of triumph. "I could not have done it alone," she said. "You have guided me, taught me, and trusted me. That is what allowed me to act." The king's eyes, golden and piercing, softened further. For the first time, he seemed not only to see her courage, but to recognize its impact on him. "Trust," he murmured, almost to himself. "I have denied it for centuries. Yet with you, it feels possible." A silence settled over them, a quiet moment amidst the echoes of battle. It was as if the castle itself acknowledged the shift, the bond forming between mortal and king, woman and beast. "Trust and redemption intertwined. Your people will be safe," Ilara said softly, "because you allowed me to stand with you, because you chose to see me as more than a guest." The king nodded, a shadow of a smile touching his lips. "And you will always be safe here if you choose it. Not out of obligation, not out of fear, but because you belong to this world now as much as I do." Ilara felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of connection and purpose that went beyond mere survival. She realized that her bond with the king was not only about strategy or courage, it was about understanding, respect, and a quiet, growing affection that neither of them yet named aloud. As night fell and the castle settled into an uneasy calm, the king led her to the highest tower, where the wind blew cold and pure. Below them, the forest stretched endlessly, silvered by moonlight, and the distant mountains rose like silent sentinels. "You have changed the rhythm of this castle," he said, his voice carrying over the wind. "Not through power nor through fear, but through courage. You have reminded me that even in darkness, one can choose light." Ilara looked at him, her heart swelling with admiration and something deeper. "You have shown me that strength is not only in the body, nor in power alone, but in choice, in understanding, the will to protect. That makes a difference, even in a world as dark as yours." The king's gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment, the beast within him seemed to recede entirely, leaving only the man shaped by loss, grief, and centuries of solitude. Now standing beside someone who saw him fully, perhaps. "There is hope for me yet," he murmured. "Perhaps. Even a cursed king can find redemption if he chooses it." Ilara took a deep breath, the wind carrying her words as clearly as the stars above. "Redemption is not given. It is chosen. And I see your choice. Even now. You are not bound solely by your curse, nor by the past. You are defined by what you do, not only by what has been done to you." For the first time in centuries, the king did not growl, nor shift into his beastly form. He stood beside her as a man, his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight, his presence powerful, yet tempered by the quiet strength of trust and shared experience. They remained on the tower for hours, speaking little, yet communicating much through gestures, glances, and the silent acknowledgement of what had been endured and overcome. The bond between them, forged in courage and strengthened in battle, had grown into something neither could deny. Finally, as the first hints of dawn colored the horizon, the king turned to her. "You have proven yourself not merely in courage, but in heart. And for that, I offer something more than protection. I offer my trust." Alara felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and something deeper that defied words. "And I offer the same," she said softly. "Not because I must, but because I choose it." The king's expression softened further, and he extended his hand, not as a command, nor as a gesture of power, but as a true offering of connection and partnership. Alara took it, feeling the warmth, the strength, and the unspoken promise contained in the grasp. The castle, for all its shadows, secrets, and curses, seemed to breathe easier. The night had tested them both, forced them to face fear, loss, and the harsh realities of power. Yet through it all, they had found something enduring: trust, respect, and a bond that could survive even the darkest curses. As the sun rose, spilling golden light across the towers and forests, Alara and the king stood side by side, looking out over the world they had defended, the people they had protected, and the path that lay ahead. It would not be easy, and danger would return, as it always did. But together, they had faced it, and together, they could endure whatever came next. In that moment, neither beast nor mortal mattered. What mattered was the choice they had made: to trust, to stand together, and to face the world not as king and guest, nor as cursed and mortal, but as partners bound by courage, understanding, and the quiet, unstoppable force of connection. And for the first time in centuries, the Lycan King allowed himself to hope not for victory nor for power, but for something far greater: the possibility of a life shared, a bond forged, and a future unbound by fear, shadow, or curse.